Strengthening question.
So when you recognize that it's a strengthening question, what do?
You first look for where a potential flaw in the argument could be.
Yeah, how do you do that? How do you look for that flaw?
I mean, I personally drew like a diagram.
Oh, you drew a diagram. I don't know that I would draw a diagram for this one. Regardless of whether you draw a diagram or not, though, what's the first thing you have to zero in on?
The main conclusion.
Yeah, why? Do you know?
Because the flaw, or tends to be the premise before the main conclusion. Or
what do you mean it tends to be the premise?
That is where the missing link tends to be.
Okay. And by missing link, you mean there's, what do you mean by that?
Opportunity to strengthen the argument.
Okay, an opportunity to strengthen the argument. Yeah, it's like, it's a piece of information that we really need to get from the premise to the conclusion, but they didn't give it to us.
Yeah.
Right? And so here, the conclusion is this whole long thing, right? The snowpack will probably melt more rapidly and earlier in the season, leading to greater spring flooding and less storable water to meet summer demands.
Yeah.
So all we have to do is look at that sentence and say, okay, they're thinking all this stuff is going to happen. And they're thinking that all of this stuff is going to happen merely because of what?
Because of global, or...
Yeah, two things, right? Global warming.
Global warming and the rain.
And the rain. And which one of those two do you think is more important?
I guess the cause of it is global warming.
The ultimate, the original cause is global warming.
Yeah.
But I think that when we start getting into these details about snow melt, yeah, that really connects to the rain.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening exactly with the rain?
There's more rain.
There's more. So is there more water overall?
No, just the proportion.
The proportion, right? So the amount of rain and the amount of snow is kind of changing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does the fact that you have more rain now than snow mean that you're going to have the snowpack is going to melt more rapidly and earlier, leading to greater spring flooding and storable water?
I guess that's the missing part.
I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that that guarantees that that's going to happen?
Not as it's proposed.
I mean, I am not an expert in rain or snow or what happens to it. It kind of makes sense to me. Like, I guess, if you have rain instead of snow, that's going to melt the snow and it's going to come down. So it kind of makes sense. But I just have to be open to the fact that, who knows, an expert could come in and say, well, no, the rain will fall and hit the snow and then freeze. And then you're going to have ice, which is actually going to last longer. I don't know. I have no idea, right? Like, we're not experts. So we just have to say, well, just because it's going to rain more doesn't necessarily mean that the snow is going to melt earlier.
Okay.
So with that, I mean, it seems reasonable.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble seeing a problem here, but that's the reasoning. So that's where we have to say this doesn't necessarily prove this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what were you debating, or should we go through them all? I don't care.
I was debating between B and C.
B and C. B. In other mountain regions, after relatively mild winters, the melting of the snowpacks has led to greater spring flooding and less storable water on average than in those mountainous regions after colder winters. Okay, so that sounds like a good answer. Actually, I would keep it over. It's like, hey, it's happened elsewhere. It's going to happen here in the Rocky Mountains. See, on average, in areas of the Rocky Mountains in which winters are relatively mild, there is less storable water to meet summer demands than there is in areas of the Rocky Mountains that experience colder winters. Wait, these answers are very, very similar. So, what? Now we have to focus in on the differences. What's the key difference? What at least two key differences between these two answers?
B focuses in on the flooding.
Well, actually, B focuses on both, right? It focuses on greater spring flooding and less storable water. Whereas answer choice G, not G, don't ever pick G. Answer choice C is just focusing on the storable water, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's actually a weakness in C. Is there any other differences, though?
Well, so C specifically addressed the Rocky Mountains, which is why I picked it. Because I guess I rationalized that other mountainous regions could apply to anything. You know,
Yeah.
like the Himalayas are different than other mountains.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig a little bit further. So I think that's a strength, right? It's focusing on Rocky Mountains.
Mhm.
What other differences are there? This is wordsmithing. Yeah.
Well, so C says areas in the Rocky Mountains in which the winters are relatively mild.
Yeah.
You don't know if that means that that mild winter compares to what's happening to this, like that mild winter for that portion of the rock. If you're high up in altitude as opposed to low up in altitude on a mountain, your mild winter is very different.
Maybe it's different. So notice, actually, this is like a third difference. The answer choice C is focusing on the areas of the Rocky Mountains, whereas answer choice B is talking about other mountainous regions. And the original argument was just the Rocky Mountains in general. But I think the biggest issue here is the 2 versus 1.
Okay. The fact that it doesn't have the flooding.
Yeah.
Mention.
Like it strengthens half of the conclusion, but not the other
Yeah.
half.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a tough one. These are nuanced. Brett?
No, that's the exact. I got it down to those two, and I thought being more specific with Rocky Mountains was better
Yeah.
than being more specific with the two effects.
Yeah.
I thought that was. But you're
Um,
saying since B does more for the whole thing rather than doing more for one aspect, makes it the better choice.
yeah. Notice there's something else that's going on here. It said, and this I think this might have been what you were talking about, Marika. We just didn't elaborate on more. It says in areas of the Rocky Mountains in which winters are relatively mild, there is less storable water to meet summer demands than there is in areas of the Rocky Mountains that experience colder winters. This is comparing two different areas. Whereas in answer choice B, it compares other mountainous regions when they have warm or mild winters to those mountainous regions after cold winters.
So it's the whole range versus parts of the range.
It's not just whole versus part. It's the fact that they're comparing part A of the Rocky Mountains to part B. Suzanne, you see that? Versus the whole region compared to those regions, the same region. Like, in fact, answer choice C, maybe it's a combination of the two plus this fact that it's comparing it one part that's mild to another part that's colder, as opposed to comparing it to one part that's mild and then that part when it's colder. Like we actually, this is a really bad comparison now that I'm thinking about it, because like what's going to happen in one part when it's mild compared to a different part that when it's colder. It's not even, it's like apples and oranges, right? As opposed to apples when it's warm, apples when it's cold. All right, any other questions on that one?